الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our daily fiqh hour. I know the iftar time is sneaking up slightly, and obviously it's going to be a little bit more challenging getting in for the fiqh hour at 7 p.m. So please do bear with me. It might be a little, 5-10 minutes later than normal. Obviously, by the time you finish iftar, after you've prayed your maghrib, it can easily creep past. We're now looking at sort of 6:15 here in Bradford, where we break fast. And I'm sure, obviously, where you are, it could be even earlier. If you're down south, towards London way, then it could be possibly earlier. But anyway, that said, we're here now. So, as I said, just keep an eye out on those things. So today's theme is going to be about global citizenship. So what do we mean by global citizen? What's Islam's relationship with global citizenship? Well, when we speak about sort of global citizenship, we saw, for example, when the religions came about, then there was, particularly with Christianity, where it had an emphasis on spreading Christianity across the planet. And it was done in a kind of a slightly aggressive way, in the sense where it wanted to remove any other way of life and replace it with Christianity. Don't get me wrong, Islam also made great emphasis in spreading Islam. But what it did do is it would allow the people of the book in particular to live, coincide with the Muslims. It didn't come to remove them at all, but allow that possibility to exist. We saw, for example, even in Masjid al-Aqsa, when in al-Quds rather, when the Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab traveled there, and he was given the opportunity by the priest himself to lead the prayer for himself in the Church of Sepulchre, but he refused to. He said, if I pray here, then my followers will take this as a place, as a masjid, and the church will no longer exist, and therefore your church will go. So instead, what he decided to was he prayed on outside of the church, which now becomes Masjid Umar. If you've ever been to Al-Quds, you'll see it there. So you can see that there is that difference that exists. So as Islam started to spread beyond the Arabian Peninsula, towards the east, towards India and beyond, and towards the west, across Africa, North Africa, and even into Europe as well, you saw this new kind of global identity. And this global identity, even though we know, for example, there wasn't always one caliphate, there wasn't always one caliph, there was divisions which existed. We saw divisions very early on. After the demise of Sayyidina Uthman, we started to see divisions within the Muslim community, but they all accepted that they had a global identity, and that global identity was one of Islam. And that continues, obviously, and has continued for some time. After that period of the Muslims, we saw many empires, in more modern empires. We saw, for example, the Germans establishing themselves even before the Germans. We saw the Brits establishing their empire across quite a significant part of Europe, part of Asia, and also Africa, and even the Far East. And then more lately, we've seen what we can consider to be the American empire. The only reason why it's not labeled as that is because we're living in the time of the American empire. So we've seen, for example, America obviously getting involved in the Second World War. And then after the Second World War, getting involved with many numerous wars, whether it's in Vietnam, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in Africa. And it's obviously, but it's the difference we see now is that it no longer looks at, keeping hold of that country, keeping hold of that land that we saw, for example, say with the British Empire. But instead, what's happening now is that we see people being chosen from within the community to now lead those particular countries. But those individuals, those leaders, have alliances and allegiances to America rather than anything else. But what America is promoting outside of America is this kind of consumeristic way of life. So we've even seen it now reach the places like Dubai, Qatar, UAE. We see across the Arabian Peninsula where success is measured in consumerism. And this is really an American export, because it's not really within Arab tradition to live in that way. Because, if we say, well, oil money, well, oil money has existed really, you go back to the sort of 1970s and 80s. So oil money has been there for a long, long time. But the way the money is being spent now is very different. The fact that Dubai is trying to establish itself as a playground for the elite and a playground for the rich. And we're seeing now with Saudi Arabia with its 2030 vision also following and taking heed from that and trying to become a tourist point for people because of the weather and what can be done there. So you're seeing now that this consumeristic ideology is now spreading everywhere. And you see the kind of standard, whether it's McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, you're seeing that kind of appearing all across the globe. Now, what other kind of worldly identities remain? Well, you still see, for example, communism. Now, communism has been around for a long time, at least a century or so. But what you're seeing now is communism is now it's been pushed, into a corner. So now we only see the Russia, and even with the demise and defragmenting of USSR, Russia still maintained its authority as a large mass body of people and land, and communism still existed. And also we see, for example, like in North Korea, somewhat in China. So that part of the world now is the only corner of the earth left where communism still exists. We've seen this so-called democracy, or a type of democracy, being spread around the world. Now, don't get me wrong, there is obviously some democratic ways which are absolutely valid, and it comes under the whole concept of mashwara and shura, and how there should be conversation and debates, whatever. But the way we're seeing it now is that it's not really democracy as such. For instance, if we give the example of the UK, now the UK is a two-party country. It's no longer, that you've got many choices. So even if you look at your ballot paper and you see 9, 10 names on it, in reality, either Labour or the Conservatives are going to win. There's, whether you vote for independent, a liberal, or anything else for that matter, is not really going to come through. It's a two-party country we live in now. Now, the thing is, if that two-party country was, one was offering an alternative to the other. So when I was growing up in the 80s and 70s, then the Labour Party was very different than the Conservative Party. The Labour Party was predominantly for the working class, for the people who did a lot of manual menial jobs like miners and weavers and whatever, people who were on low income, people generally living in kind of tough inner city kind of world. And the Conservatives were for the posh. They were for the kind of people who were coming out of working class, going into middle class, those who were living more down south. And you had this, you knew that Labour was Labour, Conservative were Conservative, completely different policies, different approaches, different way. And that really carried on 70s, 80s, and somewhat into the 90s. It's only when we saw the so-called New Labour, particularly championed by Mr. Blair, that we started to now think, okay, what does Labour stand for? And now Labour was just Party A and Conservative was now Party B, because you could not differentiate them in terms of their policies, because they were literally just red party, blue party. It didn't mean anymore now that Labour is going to stand for certain things and Conservatives are going to stand for certain things. So in reality, is that really a democracy? Is that really giving choice to the people to put in somebody who, if they don't agree with, they can choose somebody? In terms, one of the questions, especially from a Muslim perspective, is the situation in Gaza. So if people weren't happy, if they had voted in the Conservatives, and the Conservatives were, say, pushing for no ceasefire and giving full support to the Israeli occupation, then you'd find, for example, that the Labour might be, in the old days anyway, very pro self-realization for the Palestinians, very pro for them to defend themselves and all the rest of it. But now you're seeing that Labour is no different. So if you don't want to go with the Conservatives, can you go with Labour? Well, I guess not. And if you don't want to go with Labour, so there's no real democracy as such anymore now. It's just, you're ticking a box and that's it. So with consumerism, consumerism spreading, with this form of democracy that I've just described to you spreading, and being pushed across the globe as really the way of life. And we're seeing, for example, communism is now in a corner on the earth, whether it's North Korea, China, Russia, it's all in one little corner, and it's contained geographically. Communism is not going to spread from region to region. The one which has always existed, and I introduced it with that today, is the Islamic identity. Now, the Islamic identity is quite unique. It's unique in that it's not limited by nationalism. So because it doesn't support nationalism, it's restricted by nations. So therefore, it can go beyond bound. It's not ethnically particular group, meaning it's not just for whites, it's not just for blacks, it's not just for browns. So you're seeing that is no longer a barrier for it. Thirdly, it's not kind of financially sensitive, or it's not just for the rich. Again, that doesn't stop it. So Islam as an identity is not restricted by borders of nationality. It's not restricted by ethnic borders of color. And also it's not restricted by financial status. So in essence, people are more kind of inclined towards it as a way to bring people together. So you also find, for example, there is a more inclusivity in this Islamic identity that is open to anybody. So for example, there was a little clip that I saw on something, I can't remember where it was, and it was about a chap talking about prison life. And he was a Liverpudlian, a Scouser, and he was talking about how the prison system is. So he says, for example, if you see a Muslim guy getting beat up by, 3-4 people in a prison, then the other Muslims will support him even if they don't know him, because they have this link of identity with this person. They will support him in that situation. So he said, "Oh, that's the person who's interviewing sort of commented and said, oh, that's really interesting." So then he asked him. He says, "So how does it work?" Then he says, "Well, the way it works," he goes, "is why is there such a demand or a kind of a desire to be part of this group of Muslims?" So he explained, and he says the reason is that no matter what you are, whether you're a murderer, whether you've done, whatever thing you've done, the worst crime you've committed, he says, they say to us, obviously he was a non-Muslim, that they say to us that if you seek forgiveness from God, and if you take the testimony, then you are cleansed of all your sins and nobody's going to be judgmental. So he goes, it's very attractive. This chap is saying. So it's very attractive, he says, for people, he goes, because you see a lot of figures which say that, Muslims make a large proportion of prisoners. And it always gives us the impression that, why can't Muslims behave themselves? What are they getting arrested for and all the rest of it? But actually, a lot of the statistics are due to the fact that there's lots of conversions within prisons. And the conversion happens because they find the religion to be non-judgmental. Whereas other parties will ostracize you if you are a sinner. Obviously, committing a crime is committing a sin. So other groups will ostracize you, will attack you, will judge you, and whatever. He says the Muslim community doesn't have that. So you can come with whatever history you can come with. They will take you with open arms. And then they will defend you with their lives. Even though 2 minutes ago they didn't know you, now because you've made this declaration into being part of their faith, they will now support you with their lives. So this kind of is very appealing for people. The lost souls is very appealing that, it's never over. And therefore people are more be inclined and attracted towards it. So this global identity will always be seen as a potential problem for any country or organization that wants to spread its worldview across the planet. So when it finds there is a competitive worldview, which sees the world differently to the way, say, the powers that be see the world, then there's going to be clashes. There's no doubt about that. And there's going to be problems that are going to come. And there will be effort made, financial effort, military effort, educational effort, whatever, indoctrination effort, in order to make sure that this other worldview is not given the time and place. And that's why you see, for example, that this label of terrorist and this label of terrorism tends to find that 8 or 9 times out of 10 it is associated with Muslims and not associated with anybody else. Even though if you look at the amount of wars that have been committed, the amount of killing that's been done. So if you look now, for example, no matter what the Israeli army does in Gaza, they will never be labeled as terrorist. Whereas, and yet, the bombs are dropping on children and women, and every single organization on the surface of the earth have said this has to stop, whether it's the UN, whether it's state countries, whatever it is, they're all coming out and saying this has to stop because this is just killing people, this is terrorizing people. But will the IDF get labeled as terrorists? Will this act be considered terrorism? No. But then you see what happened October 7th, that the group have already been proscribed. They're labeled as a terrorist organization. That act was an act of terror, and all these phrases are used. So it happens that 8 or 9 times out of 10, if a Muslim does something, which equally if a non-Muslim does, it will not get labeled as terrorist or terrorism. But if a Muslim does it, it will get labeled as that. And that's not by coincidence. That's not by chance. It's not as though that's just happened and people are thinking, oh, I wonder how that happened. That's happened because the mind is being, I'm just going to set this up again, the mind is being prepared to associate fear. It is to put fear into the minds and hearts of people about Islam. So it's not just, in this case, Hamas, and in this case, what's happened on October the 7th. This has been a narrative that has been going on for a long time. Okay, for a long time, even before Osama bin Laden became, public enemy number one. So it's been going on for decades, where the Muslim has been considered as a one of terror. If we even see it discussed in by the Orientalists when they speak about the Moors, and they speak about these people who are kind of very barbaric and very aggressive and all the rest of it. And that has continued, and that will continue. That will continue until, obviously, this fear or this view that the whole Islamic worldview is no longer seen as a potential threat that we don't need to worry about anymore. Like the way communism is, we're reminded about communism. So no matter what Russia does, it's always Russia is the aggressor, NATO is the good guy, Russia is the bad guy. It's always given like that. Whereas, anybody in NATO can do anything, they won't be labeled as a bad guy. Russia does something, it's labeled as a bad guy. China does something, it's labeled as a bad guy. North Korea does something, it's labeled as a bad guy. Why? Because of the communism that they have. If they did not have communism, if they were all democratic states, similar to the democracy that the powers that be would want it, you would not hear a single thing about those countries. Why? Because the fear of communism has ceased to exist. The alternative worldview no longer exists. Similarly, when Islam is not being mentioned anywhere and everybody buys into the consumeristic mindset, everybody buys into the dunya, everybody is looking for that, then you'll see that no longer Muslims are synonymous with terrorism. No longer are they considered as terrorists. So that was today's theme. Today's theme was about the Muslim global citizenship identity, which ties into the worldview as well. So we'll just pick a few questions up that have come in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. What can we do as Muslims living in the West to support or protest against the issue of burning the Quran and the issue of Israel-Palestine war? Well, the thing is, when it comes to protest against the burning of the Quran, I'm assuming you mean in another country, because I've not seen anyone attempt to burn the Quran in this country. So I'm assuming you're referring to another country. But at the end of the day, if something is going on in another country, then there's little you can do. Okay. There's very little you can do, apart from the fact, just my children, mashallah, messing around with me. I always have good kids, alhamdulillah, always pestering me. Apart from the fact of making dua, these are sovereign states. They can choose what they want to do. They have their own laws. Similarly, it's not really an Israel-Palestine war, because if it was a war, then there'd be two armies fighting it. It's more kind of the occupation of Israel of literally punneling and destroying Gaza. Again, you make dua. Remember, all these things which are happening through the will of Allah. Okay, they're not happening outside of the will of Allah. They're happening through the will of Allah. And whenever something happens which befalls us, a musibah, then we've been instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to be patient. Seek ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah. Seek patience, seek help through sabr, patience, and salah. And that's what we do. We don't panic. We don't get emotional. We don't do anything silly. We don't do anything stupid. We work on ourselves, improve our communities. And that's how we make the change. Is it haram to speak to someone you want to marry for a while to get to know one another? Yes, it is. There is no permissibility to be talking to a ghair mahram, even if you have the intention to marry. The only time you can speak to a ghair mahram is the first time when you go to meet her with a chaperone, and the view is that you're marrying her. So you just, obviously you want to see her, and you may share a few sentences, but that's it. Okay. And many people say, yeah, but you want to make sure that you connect. You want to make sure that you're compatible, whatever. I think sometimes people see too much in marriage. Okay. Maybe they watch too many movies, or they read Romeo and Juliet, and they expect a lot from marriage. If you look at those families that have lived by, if I look at my parents, and the people that are my parents' age, if I look at my grandparents and the people who are my grandparents' age, they went in with very little expectation in their marriages. They didn't expect to hold hands and run through gardens, whatever. They went in and had the most simplistic expectation from marriage. She's going to help me. We're going to have kids, and we're going to raise the kids, and I'm going to bring some money home. That's it. Khalas. It was not about, but we want to talk about romantic stuff. We want to whisper sweet nothings into each other's ears. We want to do this. We want to do that. All this has come as because of what we're exposed to. It didn't exist before. It's just what we've exposed ourselves to. We've exposed ourselves to, movies in particular. Movies give a certain understanding of marriage. Okay. Movies give a certain understanding of marriage. They're all over, mashallah. They're pounding me from all sorts, these kids. So, movies give a certain expectation in marriage. So when you have a certain expectation that, this is how it should be, this is, you sit together, you're going to do this together, you're going to do that together, you're going to do this together, you're going to do that together, you're going to do this together. So one makes this whole kind of, this real Hollywood, Bollywood type of marriage. And that's why a lot of marriages are failing. And the reason why a lot of marriages are failing is because people go in with these huge expectations. Now, we'll do this together. We'll climb mountains together. We'll sing together as we run through, flowery gardens. We'll paint together. We'll do this. We'll do that. We'll eat out at restaurants together. We'll hold hands and walk near the riverbank. Because we're exposed to all this stuff. People have these huge expectations, and then when marriage turns out not to be like that, and marriage is quite industrial and quite, one step after the other, then they think, oh, well, I wasn't expecting this from my marriage. This is a bit whatever. And the reason why, as I said, our predecessors' marriages worked, because they went in with little expectation. They went in with little, they didn't have this huge, dream that this is what my marriage is going to be like. And like I said, the reason why this has come into the minds of people is because of what they're watching. They're watching that, they're seeing that, and they're being told, okay, that this is what you should expect from your marriage. And when the marriage doesn't deliver, then they get negative. They feel sad. Now, remember, you are watching a movie in which they've picked the most attractive actress, in which they've picked the most attractive an actor, in which they've given them lyrics, in which they've given them a script to read. It's scripted. It's not real marriage. It's scripted. If you want to see how real marriages are, those very same actors and actresses, you check their not real life, and you'll see that they've been divorced 3 times, still not settled, having affairs, going to rehab because they've got a drug problem, or they've got an alcohol problem, or they've got this problem or that problem. So then you're thinking, subhanAllah, on the screen, it looks like, these guys are leading these perfect lives, but in reality, they're not. So therefore, all you're trying to do is, if there's got to be some physical attractiveness. So that's the reason why you're looking at the face, to see that, yes, there's something there. Okay. Nothing to, have a song and dance about, but there's something there. And secondly, it's just a little bit, couple of words. So you think, okay, you know what? She speaks well or whatever, and that's it. That's really it, because it's then you're going to have to rely on, particularly on the women folk in the house. They will get to know the person, because they'll, naturally a woman, when she's going to meet a potential suitor, she's going to, play her bit as being a decent, person. But when your sisters or your mother is engaging with her, then she may drop her guard a little bit. So one gets to know that person a little bit better. Is it permissible to get false teeth permanently bonded to one's jaw? Yes, if the need be that this person's teeth have all gone, because you're not getting them for cosmetic purposes, you're getting them for practical purposes. So for practically, because obviously if you put those dental dentures in, then they fall out. You bite an apple and then you move the apple out, and then your teeth are stuck in the apple. So not very comfortable. So if you can find, if there is a way to put them permanently in, and that will help you eat and whatever, then absolutely, it's fine. Salam Sheikh, can I ask a question not related to today's? Absolutely, you can. Sham. What we do is I think you might be someone new. The first 20 minutes, 25 minutes, we do the topic, and then it's open season. So we're now, as you can see, open season. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Is this in this ever-changing climate and difficult circumstances living in the UK, especially in London, how can we proceed with in terms of purchasing a property with avoiding interest? It is so difficult to rent, also due to the cost of living. What do you suggest in terms of living riba-free, or do you think mortgages are permissible in these circumstances? There are numerous riba-free payment systems available to purchase a house. Absolutely, there is. So we should explore them. Yes, there may be in some cases, not always, but in some cases, yes, they may be potentially slightly more expensive, but that's not always the case. And that's one thing we should explore. Now, you hear this so many times, Brother Ashraf, you're not the first person who's mentioned it, as I'm sure you imagine. Lots of people have mentioned this. And yet we're still in that same situation. So we know the demand is there. We just need lots of millionaires, let me tell you. Really, it's a case of, having that demand met. But like I said, there is more on the market now than there has ever been when it comes to halal way of purchasing a property. Jazakallah. So I started Ramadan on Monday night. However, my local masjid started on Sunday night. Can I pray Taraweeh there? Also, how will it affect my Layl-ul-Qadr? Yes, you can pray your Taraweeh there, because the Taraweeh has already started. So you can join that. That's not a problem. When it comes to Layl-ul-Qadr, we don't know when the Layl-ul-Qadr is. We have sufficient evidence which suggests it's the 27th, but not, it's not certain, but that seems to be. So yeah, that will be your 27th, not necessarily the 27th in the masjid. So you will go with your own 27th, not necessarily the one which is going there, because it's unfortunate that we are still, and masjids are still taking Saudi sightings and acting on them when there is enough evidence now to make quite crystal clear that it's a flawed system. Now, it's absolutely fine for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They are a sovereign state. They do as they choose. Who are we to tell them what they need to do? They're kings and whatever they are. So they'll crack on with it. But for us in the UK, which is whatever, 5,000, over 5,000 kilometers away. I made a point on this on my WhatsApp status. I said Pakistan is about 2,500 kilometers away from Saudi Arabia. England, UK is about twice as far, nearly 5,500 kilometers away from Saudi Arabia. And Pakistan did not go by Saudi Arabia sighting, even though it's the Hanafi legal school. Instead, it went by its own sighting. And here we are twice as far going by Saudi sighting. It just makes no sense whatsoever. But it is what it is, and it's going to take a little bit of energy and effort and all the rest of it in order to get people moving across. But there is a movement, there is a flow, and inshallah, I'm sure with everybody's good intentions and du'as, we will get there, inshallah. Okay, so ask away, people. I heard in the Hanafi madhab, global sighting is the view. Is this true? Yes, it's the wrong phrase to use, global sighting. The reason why it's a wrong phrase to use, you probably missed a session that I did a few days back. So I would suggest, Sham, if you can get access to our YouTube. And if you go into our YouTube, you'll find it. It's a lengthy conversation that I have on there. But just to give you a shortened version, that when it comes to a so-called beyond your sighting, we're talking about 1,000 years ago, where a person would sight the moon, they would then wave a flag or something similar to let the residents of the city know that they've seen the moon. Then if somebody got onto a horseback and, galloped in a direction, it would take them roughly a whole night just to get about 15, 20 miles, 30 miles away from that city in order to notify them. So that's global in 1,000 years ago. Now we have all this social media. So how can it be that we are going by a sighting which is thousands of kilometers away? Is that what people did 1,000 years ago? Of course they didn't know. There was no way to notify somebody. There was no way to know. So if somebody saw the Hilal in Makkah, they could not inform the people in Medina. So Medina had its own sighting and Makkah had its own sighting. Similarly, there was no way of letting people know in Damascus. Similarly, there was no way of letting anybody know in Baghdad or in Basra or in Kufa. So in all of these places, people were sighting their own. Why? Because there was no way, if somebody saw the moon in Basra, for them to get on a horse and gallop to Kufa, because it would take them a day to get there. And that's too late because either they've already started or they're not started. But now we have mass media, we have WhatsApp, we have internet, we have all these things. So the problem now arises with all these devices. We're finding out way in advance before everything else. So that's why you find that people are in each country. Pakistan is of the Hanafi school. It takes its own sighting. Similarly, the Muslims in India take their own sighting. They are Hanafi. The Muslims in Bangladesh take their own sighting. They are Hanafi. The Muslims in South Africa take their own sighting. They are Hanafi. So everywhere you go, are we really saying that these big ulama in these countries do not know the Hanafi school? Of course they know the Hanafi school. But the reality of global is a misnomer, because there was no way to transfer knowledge globally 1,000 years ago. It was impossible. We only had fires and flags and horses. And later on, we had cannons. But that was it. That was the only way you could move information on. Question time of suhoor. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was not a watch. So how would they fix a specific minute time to make the fast? Surely people would make their fast and the time could have different. Absolutely, it would have been different, Sajid Bhai. 100% it would have been different. It would have been different day to day. It would have been different, absolutely, because they were always going by sighting. Okay, so yes, the minutes and this has only been made for us because all this is predicted, projected using algorithms. Because nobody goes now to sight the sun, the break of dawn, the Subha Sadiq. Nobody goes to do that. Nobody goes to check when the sun set for Maghrib. We go with our timetable. Hence the reason why we have minutes, and we shouldn't get too caught up on that. Sheikh Haytham from London said that we should all follow Saudi simply because the majority of the UK follow Saudi, because the Prophet ﷺ said, fast when the Muslim fast. That's a valid point from Sheikh Haytham. I know Sheikh Haytham well. He's a good friend of mine. May Allah bless him. But I disagree with him on this point, because people don't follow Saudi. The majority, in fact, don't follow Saudi. So it's incorrect to say that the majority follow Saudi. Actually, the majority don't follow Saudi. So if he wants to go by the majority, which I agree with him, then he needs to switch to local sighting. And in the absence of local sighting, we need to go by Morocco. You do know, Sheikh Haytham, what his nationality is, don't you? May Allah bless Sheikh Haytham. Would it have had massive gaps? So if someone went slightly past the Fajr time set, would the fast count? This is my question. Well, you wouldn't know, you see. There'd be no ruler to measure your fast against. We do, because we have a timetable. So if you ring me up and you say, is he? I'm pretty sure he's a Saudi Arabian national. I don't think he's Palestinian. You need to check into that, my friend. Brother, is it brother or sister? My apologies. I don't know who you are. Sham. I'm not sure. Sham, is it? Oh, Sham. Well, I couldn't even read it. My eyes are going. I'm getting old as well. So we have a line in the sand because we compared it to the timetable. So if my son goes, "Oh, Abuji, I'm still eating," and I say, "Oh, you silly boy, it's 4, whatever it is, it's 4:27, and you're eating at 4:30 in the morning. What are you doing?" So we have a time to measure against. They would not have had a time to measure against because they're visibly looking at something. So yes, there would have been a variance that would have existed. Absolutely. We have now made things a little bit difficult for ourselves, a little bit pedantic. We should have been a little bit, 5-10 minutes here or there. We've made it a little bit, pedantic. So we have to just be a little bit careful about it because we're starting to use these times. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Is it better to sit in the no problem, Sham? What do they call you during the day? Do they call you Din during the day and they call you Sham during the night? My apologies. Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Is it better to sit in the masjid and talk quietly or to talk outside of the masjid? Talk outside of the masjid. Also, you said wrestling won't be frowned upon if it's done when the masjid isn't filled with people. How about if the masjid is filled with people? Well, if it's going to be people, especially the elderly, then obviously the elderly won't take easy to this and it'll just cause a fitna. Okay. I'm being predictable. Allahu Akbar. If there's one thing I don't like to be, Sham, is predictable. So I feel really bad now. And if my kids were around, they say, "Oh, Abuji, that was a really dad joke." So I'm going to stop my jokes now and leave it there. Yeah, because if you're obviously they're going to think, what's going on here? They're going to think you're having a fight or something. That's the issue with it. There are college students wrestling during our lunch Zuhr time. I would not advise that. Yeah, I would not advise that. If it's not allowed, how does one explain it in a respectful way? Exactly how I have said it. Okay. Yeah, it's all right saying this sunnah, but there's etiquettes as well. There is things to bear in mind. Our masjids now, the all sorts of people frequent them, and it's not appropriate to do these sorts of things. Remember, if they're going to use that kind of reason and rationale, then dogs used to come in and out of the masjid. A man urinated in the corner of a masjid. There's all sorts of that went on in the masjid in those days that we wouldn't tolerate now. So we have to be a little bit careful about that. Apologies for my fiqh questions. I have loads, but there's not many to ask. No, Allah bless you. You ask questions all day, Brother Sham. We are on usually around 7 o'clock. I have said, obviously, because of iftar time, it's always a little bit after 7. But if you join our, what do you call it? If you join our channel on YouTube, then you'll get sent a reminder or notification or whatever it is when we go live. And similarly, you can, we have lots of social media, so join them and don't worry about it. You ask as many questions as you like, Sham. That's what we're here for. And we're here every day, mashallah. And by the sounds of it, if you are in London, I will be in London in the last 10 days, inshallah. Because if the fact that you sound like you're from London, don't ask me how I know. So if you are that way, inshallah, then we can see you there. Mufti Saab, I seen someone pray Qaza Umri quick time, like making postures and finishing. Where does this come from? How long do you stand, or what's the shortest you can pray to get through the Salah of Qaza Umri? Well, you have to complete the faraid. You cannot not complete the faraid. So that has to be done. So the fard aspect of your salah has to be done. So as long as it is completing the fard, which is a surah Fatiha, and then a surah associated with it, then that's absolutely fine. In ruku, his body has to come to pause, and then he can move again. In qawma, it has to come to pause, and then he can go again. In sajda, his body has to come to pause, and then he can go to the sitting in between the 2 sajdas and he has to come to pause. So there has to be an element of pause in each one. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe people just think I need to do it quickly because I'm behind schedule. Subhanallah. Allah bless you. MashaAllah. You are from the beautiful city of Bradford, alhamdulillah. Is the best city, obviously after the 3 or 4 cities on the planet, but it's the best city in the UK, mashallah. I'm Hanafi. Can I pray my witr the non-Hanafi way at a non-Hanafi masjid? No, I would say you shouldn't do that if you are a Hanafi, as in I'm assuming you mean pray 2 rakats and then finish your salah and then pray the 3rd rakat. Sorry, it just broke off there, so I'll say again. In the sense that you pray 2 rakats and then you finish and you pray 1 rakat alone. As Ahnaf, we do not consider 1 rakat to be a salah. So therefore, you wouldn't do that. You would pray the 3 rakats. So when they finish, you would just stay seated, and when they do their 2 salams, you just join on the third rakat. Do they have to pray in ruku or qawma or sajda or postures okay and count? Do they have to pray in ruku or qawma or sajda? I don't know what you mean by do they have to pray. Yani do they have to do tasbihat? They have to do at least 1. That's the reason why I say that they have to come to a standstill. So, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, even if you do 1, but you are at a standstill, you cannot jump down, grab your knees, and then jump back up again. You can't do that. You can't be just, flipping around like body popping. You can't do that. You have to, go into those postures. Okay. You cannot go into, so you have to pause in that posture. Okay. My local masjid pray 3 full rakats, but on the 3rd they raise their hands for a collective dua. Oh, I see what you're saying. They do the qunut. Okay. So if they are doing that, then you can stand there. You don't have to break your salah. You're just following the imam then. So there's no harm in that. I thought you meant that they do 2 rakats and then they break off and they do 1 rakat alone, like the Hanbali. Okay, so we'll give another couple minutes. I'm just going to see if there's anything that's come through on the Markaz al-Iftar. So we had gents. Where is it? If one has toxic parents or family who swear and fight in Ramadan too, can they decline invitations for iftar and do their own thing? I guess they would have to weigh up. They'd have to weigh up the benefit against the problem that comes of it. And if it is as the way you've described, that the parents are really bad and there's going to be swearing and fighting and all the rest of it, then it's probably good to maybe decline the invitation, or from the outset say, that I'm going to be busy at iftar time because I'm going to go to Masjid Fala, I'm going to pray Asr there, then I'm going to stay, listen to the bayan and break my fast at the masjid, and then I'm just going to go straight home. I don't want to trouble you guys, and find a reason to get out of it. That's probably best if you feel that that's the situation. It's not for me to say because I don't know how toxic people are and how aggressive it is. Obviously, you don't want your fast disrupted by this type of behavior. So if you feel it's difficult, then yes, there's a way around it. Assalamu alaikum. I hope that you're well. Can you please say the hadith narration? What narration is this? Is there any narrations of Ramadan being the best month? What we get from that is not necessarily a specific hadith that comes to mind that mentions that Ramadan is the best month. But we know, for example, from the surah, Inna anzalnahu fi Layl-ul-Qadr. Okay, that Layl-ul-Qadr is equivalent to 1,000 months in worship. And the fuqaha are of the view that this is within Ramadan. So if there is within this month a day, or a night rather, which is worth 1,000 months of worship, then there is no other month in the year that has that. Now there is some discussion about Dhul Hijjah, about this maqam of Dhul Hijjah, because wal-layli walayalin ashr. Got my head mixed up then. وَاللَّيْلِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ, which mentions about the 10 days. So when the Mufassirun discuss these 10 days, they say these 10 days are referring to the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and that these carry a great reward. So that's the only one that I can think of that potentially, challenges Ramadan as being the best month. But by that, there is no, some people might argue Rabiul Awwal is because that's the month in which the Prophet ﷺ was born. But, there's no evidence for that has been supported by the Prophet ﷺ or the Quran. So from these, and also the fact that there is never a month in the year in which the gates of heaven are opened and the gates of Jahannam are locked. There's no other month like that. There's no other month in which you do a fard act and you get rewarded more for it. And you do a nafal act and you get rewarded as though it's a fard act. There is no month in the year which has stipulated qiyamul layl of Taraweeh. There is no month of the year in that we fast perpetually for the whole month. There is no month in the year in the fact that we do all the ibadat that we do. So from this collective understanding, that's how we reach this point that the Ramadan is considered as the best month. Okay. Have you heard of Islam Bradford Center? I pray there. I think the Imam is Shafi. Yes, I have heard of Islam Bradford Center. I would, rather than say I think the Imam is Shafi, I would find out if the Imam is Shafi. Because I know many with it who frequent that masjid that also can be ghair muqallid, yani they don't follow any of the four aimma. Is it because it doesn't go past the throat, then it is allowed, or is it makruh? Hey? Oh, I was wondering what you want about that. Mas'ala on Colgate, Mufti during fasting, is it allowed? It is makruh. Is it because it doesn't go past the throat that is allowed, or makruh? Yes, it's makruh because it doesn't go past the throat. If it goes past the throat, your fast is broken. Okay, and that's the risk that you have with it, because sometimes people, when they're this TikTok thing is very dangerous, because I put a video up on TikTok and I didn't realize it, and there was like a background song on it. My son goes, "But gee, you're going ruthless." I says, "Why?" He goes, "You got a song on your TikTok," so I got rid of that. Now I just pressed the screen and all these things came up, like I could change my face and all stuff like that. So if someone goes up on it, if ever something goes on TikTok, please bear in mind that it's my mistake. Sheikh, last question, alhamdulillah, because obviously we've got 5 minutes left. I work in a school with children with special needs. Allah bless you. Okay, difficult task, but highly rewarding. One technique to help them regulate is by playing calming music. Is this permissible? If the school feels that this is one way in which the child reacts to, and according to your research, you find that the child reacts to it, then this would be a dawab al-haram. Yani, we are permitted to use medical interventions that are proven to have an effect, even though those medical interventions may be impermissible. So, we've known that we can use alcoholic structured medicines. If that's the only medicine that's available and it has an effect, we are permitted to use. So in this case as well, it would be really looking into the effect. I've not done any research on this, so I cannot speak from experience or from a knowledge basis. So what I'm going to say is with the condition that if it is proven that this actually works and it is the only means to regulate this child's behavior or calm this child down, then they would be. But like I said, there's those ifs there, and I haven't checked it, so I cannot give you a definitive answer. Algorithms as well, dangerous. Chalo, I thought, I was told that TikTok's a useful place to be as well, so hence the reason why I'm putting some videos up on there. So before we disappear, let me talk about the theme for tomorrow. So inshallah, the theme for tomorrow is going to be zakat. Okay, so we're going to discuss zakat. So have your zakat questions ready. We're going to talk about upon what things is zakat due, how much zakat is it, and where and how you should dispense it. So that is hopefully tomorrow, inshallah, FiqHour, 7 p.m. on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. You could join the channels. Please do share with others so others can benefit as well. Remember, don't keep this to yourself. I know Ramadan is a time where people are reflecting more, people are trying to understand their deen more, and also trying to improve their religiousness. So why leave them in the dark? Share the handles, share the videos. Jazakallah khairan wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.